Hi friends. So I bought about 6 pounds of Angus beef chuck and decided I wanted to break it down and ground a couple of pounds of it. I have never ground beef before. So I got my KitchenAid out and prepped my meat. I did wash my meat. I use a water and white vinegar solution to wash my meat. So I went ahead and just prepped all 6 pounds of it. But right now what you're seeing from that bowl is about 3 good pounds of that Angus beef chuck. So here I am grinding it. And as you can see, it's grinding really slow. So if any of you ever had a Yonana machine or a juicer, you know that when you see it start to grind and process out slow, that something is clogged up. So sure enough, I broke it down off camera, and the membrane that I left on the beef was what was clogging it up. So I got that cleared out, and now I know that the KitchenAid is not strong enough to handle the membrane on the beef as I thought it would be, no matter what speed I put it on. So I just wanted to mention that for anybody else who's grinding for the first time, that if you have membrane, go ahead and clean that off. If you have a KitchenAid, it may not be strong enough to grind through that. And that's just me showing you what I had left over that I will not be grinding. I'll probably make another recipe with that. But I saw on a YouTube channel, Essen Recipes, and I'll put in the link below, a quick looking recipe to use for this beef and some of the other stuff that I already had on hand. You saw I wiped up with Clorox. I sprayed it on the kitchen towel, not on the counter, because I had my veggies up here. So here I'm just chopping up everything in preparation. I'll also include the recipe in the description as well. I'm going to make a couple of notes about what I would do differently for this particular recipe. In hindsight, more than likely has more to do with the amount of potato that I used, because I used less potatoes in my recipe versus what Essen Recipes had. So see me chopping up my onions, garlic, and my potatoes, getting my pan heated and ready. Used a little bit of olive oil here. The original recipe did not call for draining the beef after it was fried. I thought that was a little different. As many people from many other households know, you generally will drain after you fry up beef, but it didn't ask for it. Essen Recipes, Sophia Essen Recipes said that this recipe was a traditional Hungarian recipe. Didn't name it specifically, but it seems to be a comfort food more so than anything. Probably better suited for fall or winter, but I never let that dissuade me from cooking it whenever I want to. So here I'm just frying up the beef, and it's doing a good job. All right, so here I'm just adding in my onion. And as I stirred the onion in, I noticed that at this point, some of the moisture from the beef that I did not drain kind of got soaked up, and I was a little amazed by that, because I expected to get even more moisture in my pan from the onion sweating, but that was not the case. I kind of was worried about that throughout the whole process of making this recipe, about how moist it would be, just because the end result from Essen Recipes video seemed on the drier side, not in a bad way, but just how it turns out in the end. So I kept an eye on that, and again, I'll make notes about that. I'm adding in a full tablespoon of tomato paste. The original recipe only asked for or called for a half a tablespoon, but since I had pulled out a whole tablespoon, I did go ahead and use that whole tablespoon, adding in my oregano paprika. Each were half a teaspoon. Getting all of that incorporated. I used Muir tomato paste. It's organic. I got that from the fresh market. And then this also calls for half a cup of tomato sauce. And what I did here, I kind of cheated because what I had on hand was, again, Muir's Organic diced tomatoes with green chilies. And I decided to go with that because I thought it might add more flavor since the recipe originally didn't call for a whole bunch of seasoning. I took a liberty here and added in some Himalayan pink salt. Because again, the original recipe did not require any additional seasoning outside of what was in the tomato sauce and also the liquid that you add to the pan later. So the recipe says 3 cups of water or stock. And I kind of split the difference and did half stock and half water. Because I didn't use the specific amount of potatoes, I believe the original recipe calls for 4 or 5 potatoes. I used 2 because that's what I had on hand. And I wasn't going to get up and go to the store. I should have reduced my liquid to maybe 2 cups. I think would have done this justice versus the 3. Because in the end, I felt like I had to do a little bit more cooking than what I probably should have. In order to decide how much more seasoning, you saw I did taste it to see exactly where it was and add a little bit more salt and pepper. And then, of course, adobo, just for my own liking. You could follow the original recipe to a T, or you can doctor it up as I did here. So the recipe then calls for cooking it for 35 minutes on medium heat. And so for the first 15 minutes, you cook it covered. And then after that time elapses, you uncover it, and it's basically to cook the rest of the moisture out. So you see me stirring, trying to make sure that my potatoes are good and covered by the liquid so that they cook evenly. I did not cook the potatoes, or cut rather the potatoes as small as the video from Essen Recipes showed, because I don't like mine that small, and I figured once they got softer they'd probably kind of just melt down once they cook through. So I didn't want it to be like a mash in beef. So here I'm cooking, and I've gotten to the point where my 15 minutes has elapsed, and I'm just stirring, just kind of making sure that nothing is scorching to the bottom, because the heat, I've turned it up at this point, making sure that I got everything good and cooked, making sure, again, cooking out that moisture that's in there. So it's doing its thing. Here, the 35 minutes has elapsed, and I turned the heat up to like medium high, because I noticed, again, it's a lot of liquid in here. Back to me saying I would have done 2 cups versus 3 cups as called for in the recipe, just because I didn't use the 4 or 5 potatoes. I still feel like 4 or 5 potatoes would have been too much. So got to the end here, and it probably took me about 42 minutes in total after I turned the heat up to get some of that moisture out. Does it look like dog food? Yeah. Does it taste like dog food? I have no idea. I have never tasted dog food. Put on some parsley flakes. I didn't have any fresh parsley because, again, I wasn't going to the store, so I was working with what I had. I could have left the parsley out. It did nothing, in my opinion, for the flavor, but it really tasted good. And so I ended up having this for the next couple of days. Thank you for watching. Like, share the piece, comment with love. Make sure you subscribe.